Welcome to the Boxing Source Podcast, where we go over the latest news in boxing and react to all of the fights that happened in the past week. Now, let's go to our host, J.R. Bell. Checking in, mic check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We should be here live. We should be streaming here on this edition of the Boxing Source Podcast. Shout out to everyone here that's listening live, tuning in, whether it's through YouTube, Rumble, or Instagram. We should be having multi-streams going on right now, so you should be able to check us out on what's going on and what's going down. So we got a number of things here that we're going to be talking about here in this edition of the Boxing Source Podcast here live. If you're, just recovering from what happened yesterday, we did have a number of fights that did take place yesterday. Of course, Barclays Center, the scene at the Barclays Center, people reacting to that. Crazy result there in the main event on that fight card at the Barclays Center, all right? And, we're going to be talking about it here in this edition of the Boxing Source Podcast, right? So we're going to get right into it. Of course, it was the WBC Super Lightweight Championship on the line. You had Subriel Matias going into this bout as a WBC champion, taking on Dalton Smith, who was there as the mandatory challenger to Subriel Matias. You had Matias there with a record of 23 wins and 2 losses. It was going to be his first defense of that WBC Super Lightweight Championship. Yes, he was a former IBF Super Lightweight champion there, but, of course, he did lose that IBF belt in Puerto Rico, right? But then he was able to win the WBC belt from Alberto Puello last year at Louis Armstrong Stadium in Queens, New York. So he was looking to make this first defense and everything like that. He said, I'm ready after he did defeat Alberto Puello by decision to win the WBC belt. You had the whole thing as far as like Dalton Smith being the mandatory challenger. Ended up having this go to purse bid where Fresh Productions won the purse bid. And that's why it was hosted at the Barclays Center. Okay. Now, with Dalton Smith, he did have that undefeated record, but, some people, including myself, didn't necessarily know much about his background. He had, majority of his fights, if not all of his fights, over in the UK. So, this was pretty much like his first time fighting in the States, so to speak, unless if they had something where he was part of another card. But nope, I'm checking there on the box rec. Nope, this was his first fight over in the U.S. going up against Subriel Matias. And of course, Subriel Matias having that high knockout ratio from the amount of wins that he's had in his professional career, with 23 wins going into this particular bout, and just about all but that last win he had against Subriel Matias, against Alberto Puello, by stoppage. Like when he fought Alberto Puello, that was the only fight that went the full, scheduled rounds. That was for 12 rounds, of course, right? So, a lot of people were leaning towards Subriel Matias here in this, given his past and given, what he's been able to do in the ring, against a number of his opponents, right? But thing about it was Dalton Smith was going to be in there. It's going to be game and everything like that. Shout out to those listening in live. Tay should be in the building. What's good with you here? Tego here on it. But, with that being said, let's get into it. Shout out to Dalton Smith. I'll just say that. Shout out to Dalton Smith because, for me, it was like, you're a mandatory challenger. This is your first opportunity at, world championship, right? But with that being said, sometimes you could get in there and as they say, give it a go or whatever it is, right? But also you could have something to the point where it's like, okay, this might be my only opportunity to fight for a world championship. So I got to do this because if I lose, I may never get this opportunity again. And I think Dalton Smith went into this first round with that mentality. And he was out there and he was bringing it. He was like, 1-2, snap it with the jab, snap it with the jab, 1-2, 1-1-2, one like a 1-2-1, all types of combinations that you've seen there in those first couple of rounds against Subriel Matias. And Matias, he does have that style where he tries to walk down his opponents and things like that, right? But at the same token, you got to be like, okay, hey, I'm going to take in a few shots in order to deliver a few shots, and that's the moniker there with Subriel Matias is that, hey, I want to be able to see what my opponent is able to do. If I know that I could take a number of the shots, but he can't take my punches, then I'm gonna just wear him down, walk him down, break him down, and stop him. That's usually the approach that Subriel Matias has. But in this one, man, you couldn't have that approach against a Dalton Smith who was faster than Subriel Matias, was there with the number of the punches before Subriel Matias could, even throw one shot, right? So we've seen that in the first couple of rounds there by Dalton Smith, all right? And yeah, by the time you had the third round, Subriel Matias was connecting on a few shots on Dalton Smith, and you've seen the cuts that were on Dalton Smith there from the third round. But the thing about it was Dalton Smith still was the one that was first, still was the one that had kind of like sent a message with the number of the punches that he was throwing and landing on Subriel Matias. And shout out to Dalton Smith being able to take a number of punches from Subriel Matias, including an uppercut that, sometimes would affect the opponent for Subriel Matias. But this time around, Dalton Smith was like, you know what? If this is what it takes in order for me to win and to get this world championship, so be it. So, we had those instances where he did take a number of shots, but also he had some timely clinching within the third and fourth rounds that kind of like helped him out when it came to the offense for Subriel Matias, because it kind of like nullified the offense from Matias at that point, right? But then you get to the fifth round, even though both of them was going back and forth, it looked like all those punches that Matias was, getting landed on him, caught up to him. And you had like a 1-2, right, from Dalton Smith. First 1-2, ended with the right hand. Kind of buzzed, Subriel Matias a little bit. Then Dalton Smith threw another right hand that sent Matias back and almost like had him, moving around a little bit like he was stunned, dazed. And it almost looked like he was like, okay, bring it on, bring it on. But then when he got within range of Dalton Smith again, Dalton Smith threw another right hand, pretty much landed around the ear or behind, by the ear or by the head portion. And that's how you're seeing Subriel Matias get knocked down. All right. Referee there, Ricky Gonzalez, started the count. Okay. Subriel Matias, like laid there on the canvas for a little bit, got himself to get up. Then when he got up, you could see that his legs were still not completely there. And with that being said, Ricky Gonzalez made that decision. It's like, yeah, I don't, think he's really right on this, and ended up waiving the count, pretty much like making it a TKO for Dalton Smith for him to become the new WBC super lightweight champion. Now, before I go more into this, I have one of my great panelists here to join us here on this edition of the Boxing Source podcast. I got the boxing academic here in the building. What's going on?
What's up, JR? How you doing tonight?
All good, man. All good, man. Hey, that was a fight, man. That was a fight. I didn't expect it to be like that, but hey, it was great, for 5 rounds and everything like that, man. So what did you think about Dalton Smith's performance there to get the win over Subriel Matias?
I think that you hit it on the head. I'll say what you said, but I'm gonna say a few different things that kind of I noticed. So the game is to hit and not get hit. And so Dalton Smith had a game plan of hitting and not getting hit. And so Subriel Matias, it seems like there's a space that he sort of has to where it's sort of like a no man's land with his defense. Like he does, like he has times where he has his hands up, but he's not really actively trying to block shots. There's a space where his hands are lower and then there are just free shots that get landed. And like you said earlier, he's trying to, take a few to give a few.
Yep.
But Dalton Smith, even some stuff was borderline. He was holding a lot, you know what I'm saying? He was doing a lot of things, like you said, within those couple rounds to just make sure that he controlled traffic, which again was a smart game plan. I will say that's probably on the ref to do a better job of saying like you need to, do a little bit less of this. But at the same time, from round one in the first 30 seconds, when you saw him land clean shots, even though it didn't like super hurt him at that moment, like you had to know that if you continue get hit, if you continue getting hit with clean shots like this, it's not gonna bode well for you. If any professional boxer is teeing off on you and has a free shot at your jaw, it is not gonna bode well. And that's exactly what happened. Where at the end of the fight, he got four unimpeded shots, straight shots, clean shots, three unimpeded, straight clean shots. And shit, it wasn't then that what's his name could do. The
Yep.
second shot is what really hurt him. The first shot, stunned him a little bit. The second shot is what really hurt him. And then he was sort of reeling back and his hands was real low. I imagine at this point he tired. And then the next one was just like, So yeah, I mean, a fighter's tendencies are their tendencies, and obviously he's used to stalking people with his hands down and then getting in close and then throwing his hands. That's what he used to doing. And I
Mhm.
mean, Dalton Smith, it's like this just a bad style matchup. Like it was a poor style matchup. I mean, Dalton Smith had the better game plan, and I mean, he was better on a lot of aspects. Like you say, he was faster. Um, I mean, it's hard to say was he stronger because what's his name didn't land no shots like that. Like I will say, I was in the bar watching the game too, so I was trying to like watch both of them. But I don't think what's his Matias landed anything like super clean, right?
Nah, not outside of the uppercut that I was talking about at one point when they were in close quarters. But it wasn't something to where he could continue on that momentum and still like work and try to break down Dalton Smith. Every time they had like exchanges, it was more Dalton Smith having the sharper punches that was being thrown. So when I seen that snap from Dalton Smith coming from the first round, it's like okay, he would have something here for Subriel Matias in that the overall strategy from Matias wasn't going to work for him unless if he did something different as far as like his guard and everything with that is concerned. Because as you mentioned, with Subriel Matias, he has like that guard of like a high guard, and I see this with some fighters that are around that level, championship level or close to championship level, is if you have a high guard, you got to be able to like keep it, within, close or keep it tight because you're going to have these points where your opponent's going to be able to land, right? But you also got to move with it too. So if you have like a high guard and they can't really get to the inside by throwing a jab, but you also have where they could go around with the hook. Yeah, but if you try to move around with it, how you had that Mike Tyson style bob and weave, right? So you can't necessarily have that stationary target. But if you have it like wide, then you're giving them another port of where you could land within the center, like right there on the chin, and like I said, with the hooks around the arms. So with Subriel Matias, it was more like, okay, yeah, he's landing with the jabs and stuff like that, but I'm just gonna go ahead and just take that in order to land stuff of my own. And it was basically a battle of attrition, a war of attrition with Subriel Matias. And in this instance, it just did not work out for him because he was getting worn down. You could see it in like round 3, 4, and then in the penultimate round there, round 5, he got caught.
Yeah. There's obviously things for him to work on. Um, you. So let me say this: he probably is who he is. He probably is the person that has to rely on his power and stuff. But you ain't gonna last long
Mm-hmm.
if that is your only recourse. They got to teach him some other wrinkles because that's gonna continue happening. Like people gonna see that. Like, okay, everybody can't do that, right? Everybody can't do what
Right.
Dalton Smith did.
Right.
But the better fighters are gonna see that and they're gonna walk him into shots. So I'm gonna bring in a fight I'm taking this in jest.
Okay.
If Jake Paul had better skills and better power and better balance, his game plan was the same game plan. Walk around and then walk what's his name into shots. Like the difference is that Dalton Smith was being more offensive and stuff, but the whole general thing of walking into shots. This is fantasy because that like 99 out of 100 times the outcome would have been what it been. Because Joshua is smart and he knows that, I'm gonna wait him out till he gets tired and then I'm gonna drown him. But I'm just saying, like the game plan of a fighter who wants to be just straight offensive and you walking them into shots and then you sort of controlling traffic and doing stuff. I mean, it like it was just a good game plan. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing with Smith, just props to him on this instance was because as it was mentioned at the beginning, like not a lot of people knew about his background and things like that going into this fight against Subriel Matias in comparison to a Matias who, as I mentioned there, had the fights with Alberto Puello, had the fight with Shojan Ergashev or Pedro Sanayan, or he's been on that whole thing with say the PVC circuit. So a lot of people have seen him there first, and then he would have like fights that were under Matchroom or like say for example, actually he was signed with Salida Promotions on that certain aspect, right? So they've had opportunities to see Matias on the scene while he's been the IBF super lightweight champion, and then winning this WBC super lightweight championship. But with Dalton Smith, if you're not like in the UK, you're not gonna have that opportunity to see him that much, and you're not gonna know that much about him outside of maybe a couple of fights. So while he did have the going into this fight 13 knockout wins of his 18 wins going into the bout, it's about like, okay, if he's been on that domestic level or something like that, then okay, he's fighting and defeating domestic level fighters. So going up against the Subriel Matias, then if you're not used to him, then you could say, okay, maybe he could do something here with Matias, but ultimately it will end up being like a loss for him or something like that. Like that's just being real. That's how I, approached it going into the fight, because I didn't really see much or enough of Dalton Smith to say, hey, can he get to someone like a Subriel Matias who, has had, a number of fights where he's broke down his opponents, or he's had the instance there against Alberto Puello where he went through the full 12 rounds, got outboxed in the first, 4 or 5 rounds, but then in the back end of that fight, he was getting back into it, working the body of Alberto Puello, and was able to ultimately get a decision win to get that WBC belt. So, like I said, that was a very, very good scrap between those two over the course of those 5 rounds. And some people put it as like early candidate for fight of the year. I mean, hey, we just like a couple of weekends in. So, of course, this will be his first entry there for 2026 fight of the year. But, with Dalton Smith getting this win, it was, as it was mentioning, you could see the amount of joy from him in his camp, his father, his grandfather, all of that, because of what he was able to do in order to get to that point, being able to win those domestic championships there in the UK, regional belts, European belts, then having this opportunity to fight for the world title. So he gets that win on that front, and I'll talk about what could be next for him here in a bit. But now you got this thing here with Subriel Matias. He's been the IBF champion there at 140 pounds. He ends up losing to Liam Powell. He was a WBC champion, and he ends up losing to here Dalton Smith. And with this one, it is a mandatory defense, so no rematch. That means he got to go to the back of the line. So what does this mean for him as far as like trying to get back in the mix? Because if you If you don't have a rematch, now you got to go back down in the rankings, and it's like, okay, as you were mentioning there, Boxing Academic, they pretty much like these opponents know what it would take in order to defeat Subriel Matias. So where does Matias go from here on his front? Being a two-time world champion, but having those losses to Leon Power and now Dalton Smith. So you got, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say I don't know.
Yay. I feel you. I feel you because I go with the rankings that you have out there, right? And they had Alberto Puello in there in the WBC rankings, but if I'm not mistaken, the WBC had said that they would have the winner of Matias versus Smith face Alberto Puello next. So if you're gonna have Dalton Smith fighting Alberto Puello, then where is Subriel Matias gonna fit in the picture there? Yes, you do have an interim champion there in Isaac Cruz. You do have Sandor Martin that had the bout with Alberto Puello last year. But for Matias, like if he's trying to get back in the mix, he's gonna have to work for it, especially given that he's under, as I was mentioning, Fresh Productions, who is his main promoter, right? It's not like being under Matchroom anymore. It's not like being under TGB or the PBC type of thing. It's not like he's under Golden Boy, so he won't necessarily have those opportunities like some of these other fighters that either have world championships or are under these promotional companies here. So for Matias, it's like, all right, now I'm not, I don't have the name, so to speak, to where a number of fight fans want to go ahead and see me, because that's one of the other topics that was being brought up about this fight in general, was that not that many people were, buying tickets to, go to the fight, right? So now it's like, all right, I know I lost this fight. I lost by TKO, and now it's going to be like I'm an opponent. And yeah, even though he ends up losing by knockout, right? He still had that name of, okay, yeah, I had 22 wins by way of knockout over 23 overall wins. Who out there is going to be interested in fighting me when I'm not bringing in any money or anything like that? So even as like a B-side, so to speak, will they even have any interest to have him be in the ring against a number of these opponents there in the 140-pound division? So I don't know how it's going to work out for Subriel Matias here for this rest of this year here for 2026. Fresh Productions is going to have to do some work to get Subriel Matias in the picture once again at 140 pounds, especially given that he's had those 2 world titles, and now it basically is gone for him. Now on the other side there with Dalton Smith, hey, this is really big for him, right? It's big for him. It's big for Matchroom. Big for the UK, because hey, you didn't have to put in much to have Dalton Smith in the picture to fight for a world championship. Now he's able to win that world championship and have a defense of that world title, because as I mentioned there with the WBC, gotta confirm it, gotta follow up with it, but it may be that Dalton Smith has to go ahead and fight Alberto Puello, given the results that happened between Puello and Matias last year, right? So it was more like, okay, you have Alberto Puello that's in the mix. You have the WBC interim champion there in Isaac Cruz, who, well, yeah, he does have the interim belt, but are they going to put him right in the mix here against the Dalton Smith? I don't know about all that. And given some buzz that's been happening over the past 7 to 10 days, yeah, Isaac Cruz is not going to be fighting Dalton Smith next. That's just not going to happen. But he's probably going to be a possible opponent later this year. Just depends on who his next fight is going to be, right? So with that being said, Dalton Smith, they're looking to say, hey, let's have a fight over in UK, Sheffield or something like that. Give him a hometown fight and, kind of look at him as a potential player in the 140-pound division. Now I know you had the promoter there for Dalton Smith, Eddie Hearn, of course, be there for Dalton Smith, and of course he gone crazy over the win and all that type of stuff, right? And he did talk about potential opponents for Dalton Smith. He did bring up Richardson Hitchens, who, yeah, he could have been in the picture or in the fight that would have happened on January 31st, right? But that ain't happening. And they're seeing if he's confirmed to be part of a fight card for February, which might be over in Las Vegas. We'll have to see. That's a whole nother story. But now with Richard Hitchens being an IBF champion, there at 140 pounds, you could have a potential bout that could be a unification. But I would say that for Dalton Smith, give him that fight in the UK, defending that WBC belt, and just have Alberto Puello in the picture. That just makes it easy, at least for now, when it comes to 140-pound division. Shout out to Ring Walk Boxing Podcast, checking in here on YouTube. Here, salute to you, Happy New Year's, and all that type of stuff there. But that's a lot of the things that I was kind of like saying they're within the 140-pound division. But hey, boxing academic, what do you think about Dalton Smith's potential here at 140 pounds?
Well, I have a question before I answer that.
Okay.
What is Smith's next best win? Can we pull up his resume?
Jose Zepeda, I would say. So yeah, let me see. I'll pull it up for those that are here on YouTube. I should be able to try to get this done here. So let me see. I'll have this and then should be able to share the screen on YouTube. So yeah, so this is the thing there for him, right? He got that win over Subriel Matias. Before that, it was Matthew Germain and then Walid Uiza and then Jose Zepeda, as I mentioned there. That was in 2024. So that's what you got there as far as like the rundown for Dalton Smith in his past few fights.
Okay, so knockout in 5. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
With Zepeda. Okay. What's next for him? I think with his style, maybe not so much to Holden, but with his style, I think whatever any one of the like higher tier fights will be like interesting fights. Meaning like Pitbull Cruz would be an interesting fight. I mean, it would be interesting, but if he was smart, he would just do the same thing and then frustrate him and then not give Pitbull any opportunities, right? So it might
Yeah.
not be exciting in that way, but ideally Pitbull gonna come strong for the first few rounds. So yeah, I was saying it'd be interesting in that respect. As far as what are the other names that he could face?
Alberto Puello.
Oh,
Is
Puello.
yeah.
Now that one, the only thing about that is that Puello is very skilled, but I feel like if Dalton gave him a similar type of movement, it would frustrate Puello. Versus where Puello could get his rocks off if Dalton Smith was more stationary. Don't get me wrong, maybe he does have an answer to it. I think that'll be a good fight nevertheless. But I do think that if Dalton Smith does use the movement and stuff like that too, it would make it an interesting fight because how does Puello respond to that? To somebody doing him the same way of how he do.
Yeah, kind of. And the thing with Puello is, he's kind of not, as I said, that much as active with his hands, so to speak, there, in comparison to like a Dalton Smith. So it'll be interesting to see how he would do, especially if Dalton Smith, continues with throwing the combinations and things like that, on that front. And, I keep calling the thing there with Alberto Puello the split decision king because it's always 7-5 or something like that. Either way, in a number of the fights that he's had, whether it's against Gary Antoine Russell or against Sandor Martin or against, Subriel Matias. So it's like you know what you're gonna get there mostly with Alberto Puello, but how is it gonna translate in the ring against someone like a Dalton Smith on this front? You know what I mean?
I think it wouldn't be any differently. It would, as long as what's his name don't get to throw three shots and move and then sort of frustrate Puello, it should be a close fight because Puello will have opportunities where he gonna counter and he gonna counter clean. He gonna look real good countering and stuff. But yeah. So I think it should be an interesting fight.
Yeah, it would be an interesting matchup. Depending on what they do, there. Like I said, they're pretty much on a high right now. Given that he was able to go into the Barclays Center and had the performance that he had there against Subriel Matias. And that's why I say like they'd probably be more inclined to host a fight there because with Matchroom they didn't end up winning the bid for this fight. They had Fresh Productions win it. They had them handle it. And then, he just steps in there and handles business. So now it's like, okay, we get through the whole celebratory phase of him winning the world championship and things like that. And now it's like, okay, can we plan something for Dalton Smith to make a defense of that WBC title there in his home area there? I think they'll be able to do that. Shouldn't be that much of a problem. They'll find something there either in Sheffield Arena, maybe to host that fight for Dalton Smith, and then we'll see how he does against someone like I say, I think it's going to be Alberto Puello, given that Puello had his close bout with Subriel Matias, and then the WBC kind of like said, okay, you have what you have here, and then after that, then let's see if they'll put Alberto Puello back in the mix. Shout out to L Dub in the building and Ring Walk Boxing in the building here on the YouTube scene here. What's good with y'all? Now, other thing with Subriel Matias, right, and the backstory that was going into this particular bout, of course, was with not only the thing as far as like Subriel Matias having that, I think it was like Everest finding or whatever it is or whatever he tested for there. And this is supposed to be within the clean boxing program for the WBC, right? So they had that to happen with his initial test. I didn't even really follow up as far as like what his B sample was, right? But they had ultimately made the decision that, okay, we'll let you have this fight with Dalton Smith, but if you, regardless of the result, after this fight, you're still gonna be under this testing program to make sure that you ain't, doing none of that type of stuff, ever. You know what I mean? So that was on one front. And then the other thing was that before this fight, they had the whole thing with the gloves and approving gloves and choosing what gloves you were going to use. And the gloves that he initially chose or they initially tried to roll with didn't even get fully approved, or they didn't get approved at all, so they had to switch up the gloves too. So for those that were like raising questions about Subriel Matias in the past, and then you had this whole thing with the test, and then now with the gloves, it's more like, okay, now the whole little moniker of what he was doing when he was 15 and 0, 17 and 0, 18 and 0 with all of those knockouts and things like that. Now you pretty much like have a double whammy of sorts because one, the whole thing with the testing, and then two, you get knocked out. Now, when you have that whole little moniker, whether, like I say, if you're undefeated and you have like all of these stoppage victories and that type of stuff, you have like a certain level of confidence when you step into the ring against any opponent that's across from you. But when it's one thing to have your first loss or whatever it is, but it's a whole nother thing when you get knocked out. And yeah, you did have Subriel Matias get up a little bit, and as I said, the referee ended up waiving the count and things like that. But it kind of gives that type of aura that you had going into the bout pretty much be removed. So that's why it's more about, either you're going to have more fighters inclined to fight you because you don't have that type of, unstoppable moniker anymore, or it's more of like, okay, he wasn't necessarily a guy of interest, as far as like the box office is concerned. So him as a B-side wouldn't necessarily work out for him. So that's why I said it's going to be really, really interesting to see what's going to be next for Subriel Matias, because he doesn't necessarily have the name to really like garner the attention, like say, for example, like a Isak Cruz or something like that, or maybe a Teofimo Lopez or whatever it is. But we'll see about Teofimo Lopez after January 31st, because if he loses to Shakur Stevenson, then what's going to be, what is he going to be ending up doing on that front? So that's mainly what I had there reference to this particular fight. They had a number of fights on that card. You had a round of the year candidate between Nestor Bravo and Pedro Campa, where Pedro Campa in the first round gave him a good 1-2 hook combination that put Nestor Bravo to the canvas. But then Bravo got up, and then he was able to knock down Pedro Campa a few times and ended up getting a KO win. That was another one where that could be an early candidate for round of the year. You had Emmanuel Rodriguez, of course, a contender there in the bantamweight division, has been out of the mix for a good little minute. He was able to get a win on that fight card. You had Javier Centron against Victor Sandoval on this. So a number of fights there on that Barclays Center card there that folks were able to check out on that aspect there. But shout out to everyone that's listening live here, whether it's through Rumble, through Instagram, through YouTube. Support, hit the like button, share the stream, all that type of stuff there. And for those that are listening to the replay, just share the podcast there for boxing fans alike on that front. Now, wanted to get to the next topic on deck. It's been a whole bunch of back and forth talk with this Vergil Ortiz Jr. and Jerome Boots Ennis thing. We've had comments over the past few months, ever since October, when Vergil Ortiz Jr. defeated Erickson Lubin. Like after that, you had Jerome Boots Ennis there in attendance. He was able to step in the ring. He did that whole thing about, it's time, and everything like that. But ever since then, right, it's been a whole bunch of stuff that's happened outside the ring. People making posts in public saying that there's this demand, there's that demand, and all this other stuff. That you had, we had this thing here where Vergil Ortiz, he's the man, he's the A side, he's getting these offers left and right. It's like, okay. Recently, there's been posts out there, or there's been reports that Vergil Ortiz Jr. has had some interest in potential fights against an Errol Spence Jr. or against a Sebastian Fundora. And I'm like, cool, okay. You still have this fight here potentially with Jerome Boots Ennis out there. But thing about it is that, either you're going to have that fight or you don't. You've had Oscar De La Hoya make some comments recently in public, so to speak. Of course, he has those clapback Thursdays and everything like that. But one of those things that stood out was him making comments in reference to managers that kind of like, as he says, get in the way of negotiations. And he kind of like pointed that out to Vergil Ortiz's manager. Yes, I'm going to say the name, Rick Marizian, with him, making these statements ever since the day after Vergil Ortiz defeated Erickson Lubin. Talking about, eight figures in order to get in the ring, or 60-40 splits and all that type of stuff. Yeah. But then you also had, Oscar De La Hoya talking about that same little thing as far as like percentage goes with 60-40, right? Now, one, I would say those people, Oscar De La Hoya, Rick Marizian, y'all got to be on one accord to work something out with Vergil Ortiz Jr. if you were trying to see about making that fight happen. That's on one side. Yes, we've also had comments from the trainer of Vergil Ortiz Jr. there, Yes, he is the 2025 Boston Source Trainer of the Year there in Robert Garcia. Okay, he's made his comments too. My thing about it is, well, for Vergil Ortiz, if you're looking to have this fight with Jerome Boots Ennis, then you should be able to do what it takes in order to make that fight happen. Like, don't have other people talking for you, or if they say something and you don't have no response to it or anything like that. I say it should be more of like how Ryan Garcia handled the situation with the Tank Davis fight. A number of people within Golden Boy didn't want him to necessarily take that fight at that time, but he was like, no, no, I want that fight. There's these stipulations for this fight. Weight, gloves or whatever it is, but mainly weight was the topic when it came to Ryan Garcia and Tank Davis. Ryan Garcia didn't care. He wanted to fight, right? So for Vergil Ortiz Jr., if he really wants that fight with Jerome Boots Ennis, then he would be like, yeah, I know that there's this thing here going on with Errol Spence Jr. potentially. I know that there could be something else going on with Sebastian Fundora as the WBC champion at 154. But I want this fight with Jerome Boots Ennis. He was the one that stepped in the ring and looked at me face to face and said that all of those people around you, hey, all the stuff that they said, you're gonna pay for all the stuff that what they said. After that, you should have been like, oh no, Errol Spence, nah, I'm cooked with that. Sebastian Fundora, nah, I'm good with that. I want that fight with Jerome Boots Ennis and nobody else. And here we are, we're in January, and as far as I'm concerned, we're not anywhere close to having that fight done. But I have a little bit more, on this take. But I don't know if you had something on it, Box Academic. But that's like, the initial rundown of that particular topic when it comes to Vergil Ortiz Jr., Oscar De La Hoya, the manager, as I said, Rick Merizian, and Jerome Boots Ennis. So, anything you got on that here, real quick?
Nothing positive. It's hard to say. We need to see good fights, and we are tired of hearing excuses. We're tired of hearing it's his fault. It's his fault. Like we don't care. Insert Stephen A. Smith, vocals.
I'm here to tell you right now, we don't care.
Make it happen. Make the fight happen.
Right.
Or make comfortable fights happen. Like you mentioned last week, Errol Spence. People would be fine if you didn't fight Boots, if you fought an Errol Spence. People would be okay with that. People, they clamor for it after the fight, but that's a fight that people would be fine with.
Right. Word. Shout out to Jeff in the building, G5 Jeff in the building. What's good with you? Like I said, man, all the other stuff that's been happening over the past few months, I would say over the past year and a half, really doesn't matter. Just make the fight happen. The public stuff, whether it's through, Vergil Ortiz's side or Boot's side, you hear from Oscar De La Hoya, you hear from Rick Merizian, you hear from Eddie Hearn. He's had a couple of comments in reference to that, most recently on IFL TV, and things like that. And that he said, like, oh, they had this whole thing where we had a meeting with Oscar and the Zone and other representatives from Golden Boy, and had this whole thing with the agreement. I'm like, forget all that. Just say, hey, is the fight gonna happen or not? If not, just move on. Because we've been going through this for, as I said, almost a year and a half. Whether, Boots was on the whole thing as far as like unifying at 147, and then they initially brought up Vergil Ortiz, but now both of these fighters are at 154 pounds. They've been talking about this fight when both of these guys were at 147 pounds. Now it's like, okay, if you're not going to be doing anything here with the WBC interim championship, when I'm talking about Vergil Ortiz Jr., and you got Jerome Boots Ennis there that has the interim title there for the WBA, then it's like, okay, what are y'all doing? You know what I mean? Jeff here says that Oscar De La Hoya is on that BS. Well, I'll say it like this on one end, right? For Vergil Ortiz's camp, as I mentioned, Vergil Ortiz Jr. is the WBC interim champion at 154 pounds. He has been the WBC interim champion since what? 2024 with his win over Subriel Matias by decision. He had the defense of that title in February of last year, February 22nd, against Israel Madrimov. Then he had another defense, without mentioning the thing there with Erickson Lubin. So my thing is, if you're the interim champion, why haven't you made it clear that if you're not going to be going after Jerome Boots Ennis, that you'll be going after Sebastian Fundora? Force the hand of Sebastian Fundora. Because last I checked last year, Sebastian Fundora had the WBC and the WBO 154-pound titles at one point. And Xander Zayas said, hey, I'm the WBO mandatory. I'm going to exercise that mandatory. So then Fundora had a choice. He could have went up against Xander Zayas, but then there was a more lucrative fight out there with Tim Tszyu. Cool. But now, does he have that option? Who knows? We did have some comments when it comes to Sebastian Fundora and Keith Thurman, and Keith Thurman was on with Inside the Ring last week, saying that, hey, we might have something within the next 10 to 14 days of an announcement. We'll see about that. But my thing is, why not force the hand of Sebastian Fundora and say, hey, we got this mandatory here. Let's get it. You know what I mean? But we never had any traction on that. So if you're not going to be going after Sebastian Fundora, that's one thing. You have this whole thing with Errol Spence. Yes, there's been multiple reports that an offer has been out there for Errol Spence and Vergil Ortiz Jr., right? Okay, if that happens, cool. But for me, using that as a negotiation tactic for Jerome Boots Ennis, I'm not sure if that works. Because it's like you're saying, oh, we're getting this amount of money to fight Errol Spence Jr., so y'all should up the purse for us fighting Jerome Boots Ennis. I don't know about all that. They need to talk to the zone on that. Just on my take. Y'all need to talk to the zone on that. Because last I checked, Vergil Ortiz Jr. is there under Golden Boy Promotions. Jerome Boots Ennis is there under Matchroom Boxing. So if they want to have that fight, it's either the zone or either one of y'all gonna have to put up what y'all put up. Matchroom already has what they have for a minimum purse for Jerome Boots Ennis when he fights. So if they have to put up a little bit extra for Jerome Boots Ennis to have that fight, let them see if they could go ahead and fit that bill. For Golden Boy, see if you can fit the bill there for Vergil Ortiz Jr. And there it is. You can have a fight. You know what I'm saying? G5 just says he agrees with what I said there on the BS. Hey, listen, that's pretty much like how I take it. Is that if you believe in your fighter, you're going to invest towards your fighter to make it happen. Because if you do that, he goes in there against Boots and wins. You get all of the stuff or all the rewards to it after getting that win over Jerome Boots Ennis. You know what I mean? You got more on this academic?
I guess they ain't $20 million fighters. I don't mean no disrespect or anything like this.
Mm-hmm.
So it only leads us to believe that someone is being overprotective or, it's some type of non-confidence or some, something like that going on. Because I mean, it ain't like you make we can see why things with Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, why those may not work out because to pull all that money and stuff, and you kind of got to go the turkey route or wherever route you go.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, y'all need to make it happen. Invest in your fighter, like you said. Put your money where your mouth is. This is a pick 'em fight, and the thing is, if they both try, will somebody really be demerited? Will they really be that bad off? Even if they get like
Right.
not, I mean, even if it's a, well, I don't know. You know let me not say that because it could be like Erickson Lubin where he got knocked out in like round one and then, but Erickson Lubin twice, but he got still get opportunities, right?
Yeah. You know, when you talk about Lubin, I mean, he got a more lucrative opportunity there with the Vergil Ortiz fight because for folks that didn't know, Erickson Lubin at the time was the mandatory challenger for the IBF 154-pound title because he had the win over Ardrell Holmes Jr. Over in Florida, right, on Pro Box. So they were saying, hey, he would be the first in line to face Bakram Murtazaliev, but Murtazaliev is under main events and they don't have any TV dates, and that means you really don't have that much money behind it. So that's why you're seeing Erickson Lubin fight Vergil Ortiz Jr. because there was a little bit more money behind that. So you had that on one front. And then here with the Vergil Ortiz, and that was the other thing too with Vergil Ortiz facing Erickson Lubin over in Fort Worth, Texas, was because they wanted to see where Vergil Ortiz Jr. was at as far as like an overall attraction within his area, just as a start, right? So leading into that whole bout there with Erickson Lubin, right? They also were talking about, and this is Golden Boy was saying that, hey, yeah, you had this whole thing with Boots and this and that, and I guess it was as of like Thursday of the week of fight week, they had heard like, oh, they put out a message that Boots ain't gonna be able to make it, and so they were like, oh, too bad, and then all of a sudden you do see Boots Ennis show up. So then you have all of that stuff going on. You have Boots step in the ring, and like I said, he was like, it's time, it's time. And then at the post-fight press conference, you got Oscar De La Hoya saying, oh man, look at Vergil Ortiz. He's the A side. Look at what we got. We got, Errol Spence. We got, Sebastian Fundora. We got options. Okay, if you have options, cool. Said that. I said it before. Or like my guy Floyd Mayweather Jr. says, like I said before, if you're gonna have all that, cool, go for it. But if you are really inclined to have the fight with Jerome Boots Ennis, all of those other potential fights shouldn't really matter. It really shouldn't. G5 Jeff in the building says they don't believe Vergil Ortiz can win that fight. You don't bring Boots in the ring after the Lubin fight and then, try to start pulling all the nonsense. I mean, see, there it is. I mean, it's almost like, hey, if you feel like you have those options, as I said, that's cool, but don't, try to, throw a fishing line out there like you're, trying to fight Boots Ennis, unless if you're actually going to fight Boots Ennis on that instance. On the other side there, you got Jerome Boots Ennis, and the thing about it is that Boots ain't really that much, he ain't really vocal. At the same time, actually, Vergil Ortiz Jr. ain't really that vocal either. It's more about, their promotional team and who's behind them that's really, doing a lot of the talking. But the thing about it is like Boots Ennis wants that fight. And it's like nothing else. I recently, heard from a couple of people within the camp saying that, hey, given what Boots did in his fight against Luis Lima, that put him in position to go after other fighters within 154. Yeah, but the thing about it is that from the time that these fighters had their fights, because we're talking about the Murtazaliev versus Kelly fight and the Xander Zayas versus Abbas Barao fight, both on January 31st, what are you going to do in between time or in the meantime while they recover from those fights? Are you going to have another fight, like say in March or something like that, to say like, all right, I could have this fight. Whoever comes out here as the winner of these fights, I could have options on them. So yeah, he does have a position to where one he could fight the winner of Xander Zayas versus Abbas Barao as the WBA interim champion, or he could fight the winner of Bakr Murtazali versus Josh Kelly because Matchroom would have options on the winner. So that tells you that he has some choices there at 154. So for Vergil Ortiz, if he wants to, go ahead and have those bouts potentially against Errol Spence, which I'm still like, I'm not too confident in that one. And the thing with Sebastian Fundora, yeah, I'm not too confident in that one either. Then more power to them. But it just remains to be seen how they're going to handle all of that. And for Boots Ennis, I would just wait it out here for a couple more weeks, see what happens here on January 31st, and be like, okay, should I have a fight in the interim, or just wait for what happens and try to go after, like I said, Zayas versus Barao winner? Because given the current status of who Xander Zayas is under, that might be the move. Because as of right now, we still don't know what the status is for Top Rank. Just being honest. So if you have Xander Zayas winning and he becomes unified champion, then hey, you can go after them. So we'll see how that goes on that front. But yeah, that's going to be a very interesting situation. But I'm just leaning towards this Boots versus Vergil. It ain't gonna happen next, and some people don't think it's gonna be happening this year, and that's gonna be really, really disappointing if that's gonna be the case on that front. Um, that's another thing there. I know that there was some action earlier on Saturday in the heavyweight division. You did have the WBC interim champion there, Agi Cabello, defending that title against Damian Neba. He did get a stoppage in the third round of that particular fight to keep the WBC interim championship. I watched it. I watched that third round. They said that stoppage was kind of sketchy right there, given that you had Agi Cabello have a stuff going on in the first round and the second round, but then he kind of like tried to get back into it, and then in the third round with his offense and things like that, did he knock Damian Neba down? No, but did he have Neba stumbling? Yes, but by the time he was stumbling, that's when the referee just ran right in and just waved off the bout. I just heard from a promoter from Damian Neba there, and he made a post on Instagram talking about, hey, listen, I know we props to Agi Cabello and everything like that, but that stoppage was premature on that front. So I'm gonna be like this. I hit him up and I said, hey, if you want to talk about it, we could chop it up on that. So we'll see if we can catch up with the promoter there on that front. I got my guy Smitty in the building. He says, that like I know when promoters talk about it that much in the media, 9 times out of 10, the fight ain't happening. Exactly there. Shout out to Smitty there, chiming in on the topic there with the Vergil Ortiz Jr. and Jerome Boots Ennis. Yeah, like I said, I mean, it's some things where, yeah, you want to get some information about fights or potential fights and things like that. But when it's been going back and forth this many times, when we've had Oscar De La Hoya talking about it, when we've had Rick Meridian talking about it, when we've had Robert Garcia talking about it, when we've had Eddie Hearn talking about it over and over and over and over again, come on, man. Don't like we can't get our hopes up. I'm just being real with y'all. We can't get our hopes up with that. You know what I'm saying? So hey, if it happens, great. If it doesn't, it ain't gonna surprise me one bit. It's not. All right. So what else we have on store on slate? There is some action that's going to be happening this weekend. I know we got some fights over in Philadelphia and things like that is coming up, but also on January 24th, right? We do have Ray Murtaugh versus Andy Cruz for the IBF Lightweight Championship. We got Khalil Cole versus Jesse Hart. That's going to be on that fight card. That's at in Las Vegas there, the Fountain Blue in Las Vegas, Matchroom Boxing card, right? We also have Moses Atama versus Jermaine Franklin over in Manchester on January 24th. So we do have that. That's happening before the fights at Ring 6 in Madison Square Garden on January 31st, and the other fights that I talked about in the 154-pound division on January 31st. And yeah, I do have that Pro Box card at Maryland Live on January 30th. So, over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be talking more about that fight card and a lot of the fighters that are involved in that. What else we got here? Yeah, it says that Khalil Cole versus Jesse Hart is going to be a great fight. Hey, yo, Jeff, I heard some stuff about Khalil Cole, man. I heard some stuff about Khalil Cole, man. I hope it's not what I heard, because Khalil Cole, going over his, previous couple of fights, and, him going through a few changes within the camp, and then what could be potentially happening now. I hope he's ready, for this one. I hope he's ready for that. Shout out to my guy Clarence McClain in the building, man. Salute to you on there. It says, yeah, smash that like button. If you're there on, Instagram, if you're following on Instagram, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Rumble, man, support here at Boxing Source, man. But yeah, that's gonna be an interesting fight there, Jeff, with that Khalil Cole versus Jesse Hart, because one, that fight should have, been in the works, or it should have happened, since what I would say October of last year. But it kind of was put off a little bit, and then now we got it. You know what I'm saying? He says Cole ducked that smoke the first fight. You probably heard what I heard. Hey, man. Hey, hey, listen. Yeah, hey. Yo, I'm just hold off on that. I'm gonna just hold off on that. I just know that, man. Hey, Khalil Cole, if it would be one thing, I'm gonna just be honest with this one. It'll be one thing if Khalil Cole loses his fight with Jesse Hart. It'll be a whole nother thing if he gets knocked out against Jesse Hart. That would really be crushing for him. I'll tell you that. All right. So that's what I got on that front, man. Oh, man. All right. So, that's mainly what I got here for what's been happening over the past week or so, whatever it is. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No doubt, man. I got you on that. We might hear some news in the boxing scene tomorrow in reference to a fight that's supposed to be one of the big events here within these next couple of months. All right. It's supposed to involve Mario Barrios and Ryan Garcia potentially. We could have an announcement on that. It could be that they make it official for the date and all of the details for it. Now, there's been some rumors about the fight and when it could happen and who could be involved in the fight card, but hopefully we get more information on Monday on that joint there. Shout out to Jay-Z Sanchez in the building, says devastated for Matias fight. Yeah, Matias, like I said, making that first defense against Dalton Smith, and he got pieced up, and lack of defense. You gotta have had the war of attrition against a number of your opponents, but at some point it's gonna catch up to you, and that's what happened there with Subriel Matias. That war of attrition just caught up to him, and he just got two pieced and a couple biscuits. You know what I mean? And that's what it was there for Subriel Matias. But back on the thing there, as far as like a potential announcement for Mario Barrios and Ryan Garcia. Of course, Barrios is the WBC welterweight champion. Some people are saying that it could be for the fight card could be on February 21st. There's been rumors that it might not be on February 21st, but we'll see. What happens with that. Hopefully, we get an official word on that. Um, I know that I've seen a couple of things on what is it, the Nevada State Athletic Commission website, where they show like dates of events and event schedule, and you got like dates that are booked for certain events or certain things that could be happening. So if you check on that, then they got something for February 21st, and they got something for March 21st. But we'll see. So that's what they got on that. Jeff here in the building says that he called that Matias upset. Hey man, I didn't call it, man. Hey, shout out to you, Jeff. I didn't call it. I didn't see it. Initially, I didn't see it, man. He says that Matias got hit with the Popeyes hard biscuit. Hey man, hey, yeah, Popeyes, man. Shout out to Popeyes there real quick. But hey, if you don't get those biscuits and eat them within like 10 minutes, it's over. All right. So you do have that on that front, man. But yeah, we'll see what happens if we do get Barrios versus Ryan Garcia, either for like February 21st or something like that or whatever. But of course, y'all know the backstory with that. Barrios is in camp there with Joe Goosen. I did talk with former trainer there with Coach Bob Santos, and Bob Santos had explained that in our interview a few weeks back. So you got Joe Goosen, who had been in the corner for Ryan Garcia in the past, and for Ryan Garcia, it looks like he might be back with Eddie Reynoso. We'll see, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that particular bout with Ryan Garcia, of course, still being an attraction, and if he's able to get this opportunity to win a world championship here. So we'll see how that goes on that front, man. But yeah, outside of that, mainly covered everything that I needed to here on this front. Shout out to everyone here that's been able to listen live, whether it's through YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, Twitch. I think I'm on Twitch, on Kick, all that type of stuff there. So shout out to all of y'all that's been able to join in here live. Boxing Academic, you got any parting words here for us?
Let's make fights in 2026. That's all. Let's make some fights in 2026.
Great one right there. That's a great one. That's a great statement right there. Like, let's just make it happen. Like, get all the talk. Let's just make it happen. All right. So that's what I got here for this edition of the Boxing Source Podcast. A salute to my guy here, the Boxing Academic, for being here to chime in on the topics here, and everyone that's been able to listen live on the multiple streaming platforms. We're going to get this thing here on audio form here a little bit later on. Of course, it got to be rendered and processed and all that type of stuff. And then once that happens, then I'll be able to have it in audio form, and it'll be available on Spotify and everything like that. But guy Jeff has a party shot. He says, change the recipe on the biscuits in 2026. All right. Yeah. That would be a good idea. That would be a good idea. So that's what I got here for y'all. Thanks once again, and I will catch y'all later, y'all. Peace out.